Hello, my name is Filippo and I will be presenting our research with Annette and Kenzie, and we are representing our team members from Group 31A from Animal Migration. We decided to focus on whale migration and more specifically how climate change has affected the migratory patterns of whales. Our group members include Paloma, Laura, Francesca, Julian, and Luca. We are currently studying in the first year of the Master Science program, and our first project period has brought us together and taught each one of us the necessary skills to carry out group research.
Hello, I'm Kenzie, and I'll start off this presentation by giving some background information on whales' typical migration patterns. Whales are famously recognized for their great distances that they can travel, which can be up to 18,840 kilometers long. Although it should be stated that only some species of whales even migrate at all. Based on our research, whales migrate between the cool waters near the poles and warmer tropical areas. In the summer, many whales can be found in the poles because of the abundant supply of krill, which is a major food source for many types of whales. They then move to the tropics in the winter to give birth and shed their skin. Those warmer areas are used to help newborn whales while they develop enough blubber to survive the colder temperatures. Warmer temperatures also help whales properly shed so that they are less prone to infection. Therefore, whales have three main reasons to migrate: breeding, feeding, and healthcare. Sadly, climate change has become an emergent issue, and its effects have already been shown to have an impact on the environment and wildlife, including the ocean and consequently whales. Since climate change's full impact is only beginning to show, and whale migration is dependent on environmental stability, there could be a direct effect of climate change on whales' migration. This is why our team decided to do research on this topic, and we aim to figure out the question of how climate change affects the migration pattern of whales. In this presentation, we will present the main effects of climate change on migration, including krill availability, ocean acidification, and some additional factors in order to respond to our research question. We will also discuss how conservation efforts are being made to prevent further effects of climate change, as well as what research could be done and continued regarding this topic in the future.
I will now walk you through how whale migration is affected by food supply and therefore indirectly by water temperatures. The main food source of baleen whales, so whales like humpback and blue whales, is krill. However, krill is largely dependent on plankton, which is largely dependent on ice cover, because some species spend the wintertime in the air spaces of the ice to brave the cold temperatures of the winter. As you probably already get the picture here, there are many moving parts in this jigsaw, and if one goes out of sync with the other due to factors such as global warming, large problems surface. Therefore, the variability of krill is negatively affected by global warming due to climate change. To give you a better understanding of the scale of what's happening, let me give you a few facts. Average polar ice loss is expected to be 10 to 15% by 2042. The plankton and consequently the krill will follow the ice belt further and further to the poles, which is expected to rise 200 to 500 kilometers. Changing water temperatures alters the distribution of plankton and algae and consequently the migration pattern of whales, as whales have to adapt to these new circumstances to reach the food source, and they have started to arrive a month earlier to these feeding grounds. These alterations pose a threat to further exhausting travels and reduced feeding periods, and therefore less energy to migrate and breed.
One of the many important impacts climate change is having is ocean acidification. Ocean acidification is where a disproportionate amount of carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. Studies have shown that almost one-third of this released carbon dioxide gets directly into the ocean, which is an astonishingly high amount. When carbon dioxide is absorbed in the ocean, hydrogen ion concentration is increased. This subsequently changes the pH, since pH is directly related to hydrogen ion concentration. The average ideal pH of the ocean in normal conditions would be about 8 to 8.3. However, as ocean acidification continues, the reported average pH of the ocean has been decreasing and becoming more acidic. The current average pH is now only a little over 8, which isn't terrible, but it is on the low side of the ocean's ideal range. If the average pH keeps dropping at this same rate, then the projected pH by the year 2100 is about 7.8. 7.8 doesn't seem that bad when the ideal range is 8 to 8.3, but this small change would have an extreme and catastrophic impact on marine life. That being said, ocean acidification has already started to have a large impact on the environmental processes like the migration of whales. They are connected because organisms, such as phytoplankton, need a constant pH in the ocean to obtain certain carbon ions to survive. Without a constant pH, there is no mass production of phytoplankton. And phytoplankton then must move to a different area to live, and since they happen to be a food source of krill, the krill then also must move. This then causes whales to need to migrate to farther locations for the krill. Overall, it creates a biological domino effect because whales also provide symbiotic functions to organisms through their fecal plumes, which are nutrient-rich resources for plankton and other small organisms. The end result of such a small change in pH due to carbon dioxide emissions and ocean acidification is a very large effect on the environmental system. Furthermore, the effects we have begun to see may only be the beginning and could become drastically worse if it is allowed to progress.
I will now discuss other factors of whale livelihood and migration which are impacted by climate change. Whales have internal biological clocks which have tuned themselves over the course of their evolution to the change in seasons and, more importantly, the change in temperature the new seasons bring. Due to the climate change, water temperatures increase much earlier in the year, and therefore the whales begin their migration much earlier. Due to the mentioned receiving of polar ice front by up to 500 kilometers south, whales also have to migrate up to an additional 1,000 kilometers to get to an adequate feeding ground with sufficient krill to sustain them. However, these extended journeys and decrease in krill availability has left a lot of whales to reach their breeding grounds underweight and covered in parasites. This lack of energy, due to the combined effect of lack of food and this extended journey, has led whales to have an increase of 39% of miscarriages, which in turn has led them not to be able to keep up their usual 3-year calvings. Due to the risk whales are facing, it is essential that international conservation efforts are put into place to mediate the negative impact humans have on whale population. For instance, the restrictions on boat speeds and seasonal closure for fisheries in areas of whale migration have been put into place. These minimize collisions between boats and whales and entanglement accidents. In this manner, the migration patterns of whales, their death rates, and availability of prey can be stabilized and preserved. However, the most important aspect of conservation is passing policies which decrease or prevent the release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
In this presentation, we responded to the question, how does climate change affect migration of whales? We found that whales mainly migrate to feed, breed, and for their own health care, but their migration patterns are indirectly being threatened by climate change. We found that baleen whales are most affected by climate change due to the immense toll their food source krill takes from the loss of ice cover and ocean acidification. Whales need to do longer trajectories with less energy in their bodies, due to unsteady food supply. This has direct effect on the feeding and breeding behaviors, as well as their health care because they have less energy to perform their usual activities. While we did our research, we found certain limitations. Firstly, tracking migration takes a time and is hard to monitor. Secondly, we found that there are other factors that affect migration patterns, such as long-term memory, so it is difficult to trace which negative effects are due specifically to climate change, and which are due to normal differences or choices of the whale. From our research, we believe that it is crucial to continue monitoring the migration of whales and climate change's effect on them, because they play such a crucial role in the ocean. More data will probably become available as time goes on, and hopefully more conservation efforts can be made. Thank you for watching our presentation. I hope on behalf of my group that you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and feel free to email us. During this project, we learned a lot about collaboration skills. For this presentation, Filippo, Kenzie, and I, Annette, have taken the roles of presenting the information. The Prezi slides were made by Luca, and the poster was formatted by Kenzie. We all wrote our own parts of the written summaries. Francesca and Julian structured and scripted the presentation, and Laura and Paloma made the editing for this video. With that, I close the presentation. Thank you for listening.